Hi again, everyone. Michael here from Mirrors of Consciousness and creator of the Orbifold Tarot and upcoming Arcanum X Tarot. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from everyone about both the Arcanum X and the new series that I've started on the Marseille Tarot, reading with the Marseille Tarot. The next installment of that series will come out on Sunday, January 14th. And since I've gotten such great feedback on those, I thought I would do a couple more videos on the Orbifold Tarot so that those of you who are using the Orbifold or looking for information on the Orbifold and still in that sphere, pun intended, are not left out in the cold. Also pun intended because it's January. I guess I'm very punny today. So thank you everyone for your feedback on everything. I certainly am interested in this channel in talking about just the stuff I want to talk about, but at the same time I'm very much interested in talking about things that you find interesting and you want me to talk about. So your feedback, your helpful, positive feedback is valuable to me. So with the Orbifold Tarot, there's a few methods that I've been working with and developing. I've shared a few of them with you already, even though it's been a little while since I touched on it. That hasn't really changed much. And so I wanted to do this series to go into a little bit more depth on the methods that I've been using and different ways to use the deck. Now, a lot of these techniques are not specific to the Orbifold Tarot. They can be used for any tarot deck. But some of the techniques do kind of involve my own little twists that I've put in, because the Orbifold, the link between the majors and the minors in the Orbifold is an addition of the elements, or a combination of the elements, so that whenever you have certain elements present in the reading, it reinforces certain majors that are made up of those elements. And that is slightly unique to the Orbifold, because in most more traditional tarot decks, the majors, there are only 4 majors that have elemental associations. Or, well, I guess there aren't only 4, but I guess it depends on your system of correspondences. But when the majors are associated with elements, they are only associated with one element at a time. Whereas with the Orbifold, as some of you already know, the certain majors are associated with 1 element, 2 elements, 3 elements, 4 elements, or no elements. So that kind of shifts how you combine the elements and how you read the elements in when working with it. So that's one thing. And one of the methods that I really enjoy working with, it's a little bit more complicated, but there's many steps involved, and you can actually modify those steps in very simple ways for quick readings. And you can also go through the whole process for more in-depth, longer readings. And then you can also pick and choose a little bit and go through some of the steps in order to have medium length readings, or readings that are maybe not necessarily so deep but still fairly insightful. So that particular technique is the opening of the keys method. Now, I've altered the traditional opening of the keys, and when I actually get to the opening keys, I'll explain the traditional way, the Golden Dawn or the Aleister Crowley version of the opening of the keys, and then I'll go into what my variation is. And again, that variation, it works better with the Orbifold, but hopefully in explaining the two methods, you can adapt some way of using those methods on your own, no matter which deck you use. There are actually many more steps involved with the opening of the keys than even what I do. I don't really use the astrological part or the decans part. I do what is probably considered just the first operation, where you split the deck into piles. Those of you who are kind of familiar with the opening of the keys, you'll know you split the deck into 4 piles, and then you spread out each either one pile. This is why it's kind of different lengths of readings. You can either spread out one pile and just go in depth into one pile, or you can actually spread out each pile and address each pile one at a time, and you count the cards to determine which cards to pay more attention to and stuff. So it can be a really useful, it's not even really a spread, but I'll call it a spread, for getting either lots of information or kind of going on the surface. And then even kind of reverse engineering the opening of the keys process. There are actually a few techniques within the opening of the keys that you don't need to do the opening of the keys in order to still utilize. So there's probably 3 or 4 major techniques that I've kind of borrowed from the Golden Dawn or the Golden Dawn tradition and modified. So opening of the keys is one of them, and it involves a few like sub techniques. Another one is there's a 15 card spread that is quite popular. That spread, I lay out the cards in a different order than the traditional manner, but the shape, the layout is the same, and probably the spread positions are a little bit different, but that's also really interesting too. And that one utilizes mainly for myself, it utilizes the elemental combinations in order to get the correspondences to the majors in the Orbifold, that then give more insight into each 3-card spread. And because there's 15 cards, there are several 3-card combinations that can start to show you certain patterns and can be really helpful there, and you can go quite a bit in depth with that too. So that's the second one. The third one, actually it's probably going to be the first one that I'll address, is a really simple one. It's a different use of a significator card. It's maybe a different take on the significator. It's not something I invented by any means. Again, it's kind of borrowed from the Golden Dawn. It may actually have existed before that, but it can be quite useful in the manner that you select cards. And I'm not going to talk about that yet because I think it's going to be the first one that I do in this series. And then the last technique that I hope to get to, and we'll touch on the very basic part of it, is the Tree of Life. I've, for quite a while in my initial tarot interest, I kind of eschewed the Tree of, not exactly eschewed it, but it was not really the thing that I was interested in. And I think with a lot of spiritual tools and different spiritual groups, some spiritual groups will really cling strongly to one particular method or one particular way of viewing their spiritual model, and then adepts within that tradition will then cling to that particular method and say, well, this is the only method, this is the best method, everything is related to this, and if you don't know it, you're a spiritual idiot, and blah, 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 blah. Maybe not spiritual idiot, but it can come across that way sometimes. The really extreme version of that view can turn into that. And that's not unique to any particular method, any particular spiritual tradition. It exists in all of them because that's just a human tendency, because we want to validate what it is we're practicing for whatever reasons. That's a whole other subject, but we want to validate what we're practicing and what we're following. And I think that assertion that, oh, well, this method is the way, this is the one, is a form of that validation. It's self-validation. And then if others who feel the same way say, oh, yes, oh, absolutely, you're right, this is the only way, this is the way that I've been practicing too, and it's the way, it's the only way, and blah, 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 then you get kind of a mutual validation from that. And it can reinforce that idea of this is exceptional and then all other practices are not. Now, and I'm guilty of it too, from a different from another tradition. I certainly have my views of this is a strong way to practice, this is not. So that's all just to say, I have found that in the tarot community, or in some parts of the tarot community, that the Tree of Life is exalted above all else, that it is the epitome of spiritual study and spiritual practice. And I have to say, of course, you know, not that I didn't believe it before, it wasn't what I was interested in at the time. I've gotten more interested in it now. But at the time, I was kind of turned off, not by the Tree of Life itself, or the ideas that it explains and encompasses, and it is quite a wonderful system. But I was turned off from looking at it more seriously because of that kind of adamant take that, oh, if you're not studying the Tree of Life, then you are not a serious occultist, you are not a serious spiritualist. And my tradition, we have Ganesh here. I mean, it's not my tradition, but the kind of spiritual worldview that I relate with the best is a more Eastern worldview. And a lot of the concepts that are explored and explained through the Tree of Life are explored and explained in every spiritual tradition. They're just explored and explained in slightly different ways. And so because I relate to the Eastern tradition, more specifically the Indian tradition, more, they have a different way of explaining those same concepts. It's a different model, and there are differences in the structure and the format of how it's explained and how it's visualized and how the cosmology all fits together. But there are many similarities too. Since I relate really well to that, it works for me. I was really turned off by the Kabbalistic Tree of Life view that was saying, oh, this is the only way, because I was looking at it from a more holistic perspective, going, well, I'm sure it's a wonderful way, and now that I've gone into it a little bit more, it is. Not that anyone needs my validation on that subject, but I've validated it for myself that yes, indeed, it's a valuable system. And again, like, not that I didn't think it was valuable before. I recognized that it was valuable to some people. It just at the time was not, its value wasn't prevalent to me. So that's all just to say that in this particular series, what I hope to get to near the end, although we may touch on it in the beginning, is some Kabbalah and some Tree of Life stuff. And what I hope it'll be is in an approachable way that doesn't involve all of the correspondences and all of kind of the rigid aspects of it. And yet at the same time, even if it doesn't include all of that stuff, it doesn't detract from the value of that system and how it can work as a, really in practical matters, as a layout for tarot, as a way of reading tarot. So that's, I guess, a summary of what I hope to achieve with this upcoming series, which I plan to run parallel to the Tarot de Marseille series that I'm still working on, and will continue to do so. And of course, there are times when certain themes will overlap or certain techniques will overlap and can be used in conjunction with each other. But this particular series will be, I will probably use the Orbifold for most of the examples, and it will have a little bit more of an Orbifold bent because it is geared toward how do you apply these techniques to working with the Orbifold, at the same time explaining the techniques in a way that if you're not already familiar with those techniques, perhaps you can use them with your other tarot decks. So I look forward to sharing that series with you too, and hearing the similar kind of feedback, if you have any, on that series as we go along. So I'll look forward to that, and I hope you'll look forward to it too, and we'll see you again soon.